this presentation is about of the analysis we have done in the University of Rwanda as the part of our outreach activity about of the two psychological center in the Kigali of Rwanda with my colleague Rahman Tafahomi between of the 2018 and 2019, and the result of that is presented in the conference and also published as the paper. For this presentation, list of the content is divided to the four important parts. Is the background of the study, what we get it from the therapeutic landscape, and how we have done the research and or evaluation about of those psychological centers. And after that, I'm going to share with you our finding and summary about of those psychological center. On the background of the study, we have a very rich information in the history on the base of the mythology and healing gardens that somehow this aspect of the mythology is related to the spiritual of the place, spiritual aspect of the beliefs and the people that is create some important quality and criteria for the locations. And in the background of the studies in the history of architecture, we can see that some of this healing garden that originally they have been temples of the Greek gods and Roman gods, in the Christianity time also they changed it to the church to keep this healing garden concept and spiritual aspect of the location to use for such kind of the activity. Therefore, I'm trying to explain this aspect that therapeutic landscape is part of the process of the believing of the people in the very long history of the civilization. As we know, for the psychological center, before of the, importantly, 20th century, psychological center, it was very close to the prison and a center for the torturing of the people, because on the basis of some background from the religious aspect of the beliefs, they believed that evils somehow accommodated in the mind of the people, and they needed some purification of the mind and spirit to do that. Therefore, normally is happened through some physical activity that the structure of the psychological center before of the time of the believing the psychology as the science is happened to those psychological center. We have a lot of production, particularly Michel Foucault concentrated in this aspect, and for example, the book of the Madness and Civilization, Discipline and Punish, and the Birth of the Clinic, he tried to do as his term, as the archaeology of the science and knowledge, to discover how the science tried to purdiament this aspect of the knowledge and create some discipline and some framework for the dealing with the patient. And he very in the clear way tried to present that before of the science, before psychology come in the science discipline, how it was predominated with the other aspect of the beliefs and somehow on the basis of the disciplines. Recently, we had two movies, that A Beautiful Mind and also Shutter Island, that show this tradition of the behavior, particularly in the indoor space, how it's happened, that you can get some idea about of the before of the time of this new concept of the psychology centers, how is working. According of this aspect, therapeutic landscape produces a lot of things that there are many sources about of those aspects, particularly after 1960. We have a lot of production with the philosophers, with the landscape architect, and with the other person try to connect between of the sociology, between of the psychology, between of the anthropology, and between of the built environment that make question how our belief, how our knowledge affects on the built environment, and how we get the sense of the place from the environment, and how our sense and spirituals affected from this process. Due to this background of the knowledge, normally in the therapeutic landscape, we think about of the relation between of the human and the planting, handcrafting, and cooking things that all the time is happening in this process. And somehow this kind of the physical activity with the natures get this sense of the be part of the nature and be part of the environment. Therefore, there are a great evidence that show that landscaping and gardening process affected on the physical, mental, and social health. Specifically, the production of the journals and books highlighted that blue landscape, looks like the waterscape and other kind of the elements, affect on the mental health in the short time and in the long time. And the green spaces affects on the physical and social health. However, in the short time, normally you get a sense of the pleasure and stress relief. However, in the long term is effect on your physical health. For this reason, therefore, level of the sickness and the psychological problem in the most crowded city and polluted city is higher from the other location for the lives. Therefore, for this therapeutic landscape, therefore, this is a health domain that related with the physical, emotional, social, and spiritual, and also intellectual, that our mind, system of the mind is affected in this process, and somehow human health and well-being is connected with the environment and the nature. Therefore, some concept looks like the ecotherapy, ecopsychology, and the natural-based therapies is now emerged in the treatment approaches in the psychological center and in the other clinical things. Therefore, the process of the treatment, healing, and the nursing of the patient from the inside and indoor coming to the outdoor activity. We have a list of the landscaping criteria on the basis of the hardscape and softscape that emphasizes on this specification of the elements. In the hardscape looks like the space and subspace that create different sense of the place in the different location. Attribute of the spaces, such a kind of the scale, size, and the level of the privacy. How the indoor and outdoor connected together, and how the view of the green and blue now became a quality of the construction in the not only in the urban design and landscape, but also in the architectural level of the construction. Accessibility for the everyone, and also how the people find easily their way in the location and a smooth way. Furniture, shelter, and aesthetic aspect of the public art as the hardscape. On the softscape part, particularly bluescape and greenscape, we have a somehow level of the transparency and the level of the lighting, level of the protection from the noise, harsh light, and other aspects. Color, it is a very important criteria in this part. Green space, a combination of the trees, shrubs, vegetation, flower, and grasses, and the meaningfulness. Therefore, on the basis of the different culture, we have a long process of the attribute beyond of the meaning, and each plant have a specific symbolic meaning that needed to integrate in the landscape part. And the scent of the places, natural form of the element, bluescape, and fauna as the one of the elements that needed people interact with that. This criteria implemented in some example that we have in the world, and those centers for the cancer, for the patient, for the psychological part, there are very strong aspect of the implementation of those therapeutic landscape in the designing, that some of the example is here. For example, Yale New Haven Cancer Center, or Boston project for this one, or other example in the other countries. I try to find some example of the picture for that. This project of the Nelson Mandela is very new for the children that try to use it. Miami Center is working with the very nice with the blue escape and some water escape in the working. Yes, some other example about of the coloring and other aspect that it is emphasized on the public art and the aesthetic aspect. Okay, on the basis of this specific part of the knowledge we have, what going on in the Kigali and Psychological Center? It is the context of the Kigali, and you see how the natural and environmental things is rich. But here is the psychological center we have. And it is very clear how these centers is going to communicate with the patient, with the users, and with the other people. Therefore, the aim of these studies was we try to demonstrate what is the missing aspect and what kind of the opportunity we have, and how we can deal with that. Try to this aim and analysis part, we try to clarify the problem we have on the basis of the lack of the therapeutic landscape in this center, that somehow every activity of the people focused in the indoor area and somehow outdoor spaces is not activated. Methodology we applied in this research was the qualitative method. Particularly, we used the structured observation for the behavioral pattern of the patient and users, and we selected some photograph from the site, but not from the patient. It was forbidden somehow from the outdoor and green space and open spaces. We try to use from the graphical analysis and put an overlaying to find out what is the important things. And we have done some interview, particularly with the doctors and the research managers and the nurses in these centers. Therefore, through these methods, we collected some data on the basis of those things, and somehow I'm going to share with you what we have in these centers and how they applied this therapeutic landscape in this center. In the interview part, they believe that yes, landscape have a positive effect. However, people for the first time, they heard some things about of the therapeutic landscape and healing garden. Therefore, this specific part of the knowledge, it seems, is not shared very well with those experts as the medical scientific person in the hospitals. Therefore, our observation also confirmed that landscape in this center, it is on the basis of some grass covering and the absence of the waterscape and the gardening some for the few area, and it was not systematic things. Okay, it is the structure both of the center. It is the Ndera Hospital Center, and Ikeziri, it is the center under supervision of the Ndera Hospital Center. The structure of the both building, it is on the base of the geometric form with some courtyard. That this courtyard create a lot of visibility to control the patients, and particularly they create courtyard between of that somehow this courtyard working with the buildings. Okay, therefore each building have a connection with the outside to control what activity happened outside, but just on the base of the green spaces, just controlling and see passing of the patient and how the people go there, and it is just monitoring in this structure. On the landscape, we have some open spaces, and much part it is on the base of the constructed and hardscape. The structure of the trees in this part, it is just linear things that create a boundary. Is not a natural part, it is not a part, is not also for the gathering of the people. It is just create a boundary for the spaces that mainly there are wood and forestry. We have just a small garden in the Ndera Center with the banana trees. Passing of the runoff of the water, just the water is coming on the rainy season, they guide the water in the outside, they don't use it, and they don't have any kind of the water stream, and the channel of the water also is covered, and they don't have any plan to use of the too great raining season in this area. Behavioral pattern of the patient just occupy close of the building. Therefore, however, we have here open space, no one uses from this area. Just on the shelter of the building, some of the patient sitting together and talk in this area. Therefore, for the open space activity, for the crafting, for the other kind of the activity is never observed in both centers. Therefore, somehow this passive activity normally take a place in here. For the active activity on the basis of the meeting and chatting, normally visitors from the outside, they coming and take a seat from this area for the visiting of the patient. Therefore, again, the hardscape and the buildings play significant roles on the behavioral pattern of the people, and the open space and green space, nothing is happened inside. However, you saw that how the context it is the rich on the base of the green space and climate. For the outdoor gaming, crafting, playing, nothing observed. However, when I talked with the those director of the both center, they mentioned, yes, we have a playing, we have a crafting, and outside, but never is observed, and we didn't find any traces that show people use from the outside. For the therapy, also the same, never is happened outside. They use from the just indoor spaces. Okay, what is our finding on this space? In this center, on the basis of the space and subspace, the people manager of the centers, they believe that priority is with the indoor space than outdoor. They can control it. However, when I discussed with the research manager of the hospital, they mentioned we have 7 categories of the patient. 2 of them, there are violence patients that needed restriction in the buildings. However, other 5 clusters, they are free to come out and they use from the spaces. However, space and subspace cannot provide such kind of discussion. Just patient and the visitors, they use from this very narrow shelter of the buildings. Therefore, level of the variety of the size and privacy in the space is not exist. Somehow just surrounding part of the building can provide some kind of the facility. Connection with the indoor and outdoor just on the basis of the visibility and monitoring of the patient. Therefore, some view to the green connection with the landscape is not provided in this designing style. Therefore, insufficient green space and lack of the blue spaces existed in the both center, and accessibility is limited to all the part. Some of part is just grasses and open spaces without any kind of the active using of the landscape. Therefore, a few connection exists in the site, and the furniture is not exist just in the in their hospital. We have another part for the kids that they have some furniture for the playing, but other patients no. We don't have shelters in the outside for the sun and for the raining season. Therefore, in the almost 6 months raining season in the country, all the patients and visitors should be stay indoor, not outdoor. Therefore, no any artificial things that is happened in the outside. For the Softscape part, therefore, there are a lot of opportunity for the creation of the spaces that, and however, this opportunity is not used very well. Therefore, we have a less system of the protection of the noise and harsh light and such kind of the pollution in there. And a lot of sick trees observed that they're going to be dry in the future time, that a system of the treatment of the trees also is not exist. Few color material is there, just Dorona shrubs they use with the yellow color, but variety of the vegetation and the flowers is not exist there. Therefore, we didn't see any kind of the metaphoric or symbolic trees. This just they have some grevillea trees and some of the palm trees. Both of them are foreigner trees, is coming from the South America and South Asia. That is not local trees without any meaning from the location. Therefore, not any scent or few aromatic flowers is very few. Therefore, each natural form is totally destroyed. However, the center of the both location was a natural forest. On the base of the construction, they have done a deforestation, and after that planted some trees, that the natural form of the landscape totally disappeared in the both centers. Therefore, blue scape we don't have, and they don't use it from the anything, and therefore, for this reason, relation between the fauna and particularly some escape looks like the bird bass and the feeding or nesting of the birds also is not happen regarding of the combination of the trees that cannot support leave of the fauna as well. On the basis of the summary, what we have and what kind of the recommendation we presented to both centers. Actually, the first observation was the less knowledge about of the therapeutic landscape. And when we talk about after this issue, they somehow surprised that this field of the knowledge exists and they can use it, and there are some books and other issues that they can use it from this part. Mainly, they mentioned we face it with the limitation of the budget and financial issue for the construction, for the landscaping and other things. However, I discussed with them and I mentioned the Softscape normally needed a plan and design, because the budget for the Softscape and for the landscaping, it is the very less than hardscaping. It seems that priority and some strategy they took for the construction of the area is not supported landscape that can use for that. Therefore, design and implementation is needed a plan and a process. However, they do some ad hoc activity that try to just solve the problem daily by daily is not somehow a plan for the landscaping and use it of the spaces. Therefore, for the recommendation, we shared with those centers that there are a lot of experience in the other centers that how they contextualize those lessons on the basis of the human sense for the better feeling in the space, not only for the patient, but also for the staff, for the medical teams that they work in there. Therefore, when I ask them, when you're going to take a coffee in here, where is the location you go? Normally they mention we go to our office. Therefore, no one uses it from the outside. Not only patient, but also those staff in there. Therefore, somehow we needed educate the staff to introduce this importance of the therapeutic, that they use it for oneself and for the patient, that to apply and somehow integrate in the process of the treatment of the patient. And they need to know that it is the scientific field that they needed provide a landscape plan for that. Is not possible that on the basis of some traditional activity or ad hoc activity, they design at the center. And the important things, it is somehow this we needed to engage that landscape with the structure of the working and somehow integrate in the construction. And on the basis of this research, we provided a requirement for the Ministry of the Health as the guideline for the using in the hospital, however, is not implemented so far. Therefore, it was the major activity that we have done, and it was a result of our research about these two centers. His paper is published in the Citizen Health in the 2020s, and I think I have done, and if you have some question, I can share with you answers.
Thank you, Rahman, very much. It was very interesting and insightful, actually. Well, it did make me think a lot. I have some questions.
Okay.
I have two questions. So yeah, maybe I just start with my two questions. First question: how many patients are there in the centers, and what sort of diseases they're dealing with? And second question: it really struck me the distinction between green and blue. That green is good for physical and blue space good for mental health. And it is really telling, and I feel that it is really true from my research. But I would like you to explain what are the rationale behind that and who came up with this distinction. Could you elaborate a bit? Thank you. That's my two questions.
Could I answer, or I should wait for the other question?
Well, I think, yeah, maybe you can answer and then we go to another person.
Actually, the hospital of the Endera is included around of the 230 patients. All of them are not hospitalized. Some of them under consultancy and on the basis of some visiting regularly. And the Ikizeri Center is around of the 60 patients. Therefore, Ikizeri is more smaller. Both of the center normally and mainly focused about of those patients have a trauma from the genocide time, and they somehow engaged with this trauma experience. However, patient, those affected with the drug and alcohol also included this part. Therefore, major part of the patients in the Kigali Center are those addicted person, particularly alcohol and drug. But in the Endera Center, it is normally those traumatic patient is included. Important aspect of those person, they have some depression and such kind of activity. They don't share with me about those violent patient, but they mentioned we have two specific group of the violent patient that we somehow restricted from the other part of that, therefore is not possible to visiting there, and also is what is not possible to take a photograph from the inside of those centers. However, inside exactly was on the structure of those photos I show you. It looks like exactly some corridors with some cells that is less give you a hospital image than other activities happen there. For the second question about the blue landscape, we have a continuous process of the researching in the Canada, in the Vancouver, about those elderly people and about the kids, those participated in the using of the green space in the shoreline and the cruise of these areas. And they have done for the 15 years questionnaire, and they collected this result that they show how these people are going to improve this process. I have references, if you like, I can share with you about those sources that I used from those aspects. From the green space, current result that show green space is effective part of the landscape that could affect on the basis of the physical and social health. Popular is not on the basis of the decorative of the, for example, Greece of Roman garden. It is more close to the Chinese style of the garden and British style of the gardening, that we have some small forests, we have some open field, and we have some designing area that is a combination of that is create sense of the natural landscape. Also, there are some studies on the effect of the wetlands and the riverbed on the patient, that this combination of this kind of the research create this classification on the basis of the blue landscape and the green landscape.
All right, thank you, thank you. Any other questions? Sure.
Yeah, can I ask a question? Thank you, Rahman. Nice to see you again, by the way. It's a really interesting topic. I was actually quite interested also at the beginning of your talk. You mentioned aspects that were actually quite insightful for me in the sense that you were actually trying to connect this idea of mental health and well-being from more of a spiritual perspective and how it was linked to the design of or the architecture of temples or specific buildings. And I also saw that throughout your exploration, you perhaps use Michel Foucault as one of the main resources to understand, right, the dynamics of how to interact in such buildings. So Madness and Civilization, which was one of the books that I think is remarkable in terms of mental health and well-being. But I was wondering, as you move towards the presentation of your results and the summary of your results, I saw that you in several occasions mentioned things related to symbolic meaning. Of course, I think I'm linking it with Foucault's standpoint on mental health and well-being. So you mentioned symbolic meaning, and I'm curious about it because in some of your recommendations, you were also highlighting the idea that is no planting metaphor and symbolic trees. So I want to ask you precisely what are you referring to in the summary, just in the results of what you're presenting when we look at the architectural piece and how the space is you are an architect, so I think you understand what I'm trying to tell you here. So I'm trying to understand whether when the architectural piece is designed, there is some sort of deontologization, of that spiritual patterns. That's the reason why there is that absence of metaphors and the symbolic meaning. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Okay. I believe, Diana, around of the 4 questions, you combine it together. I try to divide it, and one by one, I'm going to answer it. Work of the Foucault, it is on the basis of the somehow chronology and somehow archaeology of the process of the belief about of the madness in the context of the Europe. Therefore, he classified of the madness in the 5 categories, if you remember. First, madness is coming from the ancient time. That madness is about some things you cannot believe to that, and some things is out of your mind. Therefore, madness all the time is very close to the philosophy. Therefore, each philosopher have some madness sense, and each madness have some very wise voices that can share with the other part. Therefore, in the second category of the Foucault, that is continue to that, somehow this madness, it is spiritual and became part of the differentiation of the religious aspect, particularly in the Christianity and in the outside. Therefore, if you are mad, you are not people and a slave of the God. Therefore, totally, you are a person as the symbol of the devil. Therefore, the punishment of the Christianity is happened in this process. Therefore, those respect to the sense of the madness does not exist, and totally it is the somehow negative aspect. In the third classification of the Foucault, we have this process of the madness became a human sense. Therefore, you became a lover, looks like the Romeo and Juliet, and you do very madness activity. Therefore, madness is prouded with you. When you are mad, you do sacrifice, you do everything you wanted. It is not just for the personal thing, also for your country, for your belief, for your religion, and everything is happened. Therefore, madness again became unconnected with the civilized area. In the 4th classification of the madness, it is time of the somehow rational and on the base of the first step of the after Renaissance, that in this part try to divide the mad people from the normal people. Therefore, first classification of the normal and abnormal is happened, and the madness people collected, separated, isolated, and put it in the area. And just recently, in the base of the science, madness became part of the knowledge. Therefore, this chronological exists. However, Foucault did not bring it to the part of the somehow this symbolic meaning and other things. Just in the anthropological and ethnographical things is going to analyze that. We have 2 groups of the landscape architecture and somehow ethnographical person. Those people believe it to the some meaningful behind of the every physical element. Looks like the meaning for the trees, that is part of the our culture. In the every culture, you can see some of that. The recent movie is released about of the life, this architect, A Little Chaos. I'm sure every person saw it as the landscape architecture because it is about the life of the lady landscape architecture, and we see a trees as a shrine. Therefore, people give the beliefs to the trees that create meaning for that. Therefore, we have a two group of the people. Those believe it, there is a power of the spiritual and meaning behind of the nature. Those things believe it, that it is an artificial creation of the people to give a respect to the nature. Therefore, beyond of that is not anything exists. Okay. Therefore, we have this conflict in the landscape part. What going on in the context of the Africa? We have around of the somehow more than 90% of the species in the Africa on the colonization time is coming from the South America and South Asia for the some production and other things. We have a very small and few area as the natural resource included those things of the species. But African people, they believe that some kind of the those species that included some spiritual aspect that protect them from the evils, from the bad will, and some things like that. Interesting things, in the behavioral pattern in the outside of the centers, normally people used from the trees to sitting there for the discussion, for the some community activity in the village area. Therefore, those trees is very respectful. And there are some of the trees, if you're going to change the forest and to the farm area, no one in the Africa going to cut it. Normally they employ some Chinese people to going to cut those trees because they believe it, if some person cut these trees, the trees of the family going to discontinue. Therefore, no any generation is happening. Therefore, such kind of the spiritual belief exists. Perhaps no one talk about that, but exists. When we talk with the people, they know it, but they don't implement it there. And when we try to explain, okay, when you design the landscape, there is this very rich background and this root in your culture. How we cannot see it? They mention, okay, perhaps we neglected of that, or part is not part of the landscape designing, and some things like that. Therefore, this lack of the symbolic trees that exist, and there are some research on that, we cannot find it anymore. Therefore, this disconnection between of the context appear in all the aspect. I hope I covered your question. I'm not sure.
Yes, Dr. Rahman, you did. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting your point of view. I'll leave someone else want to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have last question and then go to our next speaker. Ola, right? You had a question.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. It was very interesting, especially for me that I'm not an architect. So I have a question that is related to what you presented, but not really connected to architecture. So I'm not sure if you have any information about it. But since you said something about like most of the patients in the center it was patients who had issues after the genocide, right? Mm-hmm. And so this aspect kind of interested me. Do you have any knowledge if there are any special programs, for example, there as well, like maybe they cooperate on like, I don't know, reconciliation issues, and also how do they technically divide a place where, I mean, with such a ethnic division and in a place, like, are they have any special programs? Are they treating the patients together, like of Tutsi and Hutu? Like, I wonder how also technically it's been kind of organized there, you know, if maybe, I don't know, if they have some special programs working on the reconciliation, since they have probably patients from let's say both sides. And I mean, it's been years, but decades. But I mean, I think the ethnic divide is quite extensive in Rwanda. So if you have any information, or maybe you know of a place where I could find this information. Thank you.
Actually, as far as I know, there are a lot of programs in the Rwanda on the base of the somehow make peace between those conflicts has happened, and they try to recover the patient. Importantly, it is on the base of some community-based activity and some centers. Particularly, we have a lot of memorial center in the Rwanda. Part of the program of those memorial centers, it is some public talk, public activity that try to bring both groups together and they share our experience. Therefore, for those somehow what we call it, those effective group, how they are sorry about of that, and for those affected people, how they're feeling about that. And a lot of this activity is going on. And I know that the field conflict and peace in the department of the sociology, it is very active department, and each year we have some scholarship and grant for the student who's going to abroad to read of this issue and return back to the country to make it therefore this peace. After this genocide times, you know it, officially no one have a right to tell about of the ethnical background. Every person in this country now is Rwandan person. No any ethnical background exists. Therefore, in this context, they try to make somehow reconnect all the people, but somehow the process is going to improve the condition and a little bit make country on the development part. But as you know it, such kind of the very catastrophic things needed a long time planning, to be patient, and recovery things that we come back perhaps in the normal condition, perhaps.
Thank you, especially for saying I had no idea that they're not now. No one is allowed to really say what their ethnicity is.